going on, everyone? So we're in this trend in just Hollywood period where we are just getting constant requels and remakes and different variations of the same old thing, and especially in the horror space, right? Like there's very few originality and original movies that have came to the surface. And now you're getting things like the requel to The Exorcist, right? And it's like, is that something that really needs to be done? Do we really need to just continue that story? And if so, how are you going to actually tie it in? And is it just going to be another demonic movie just like everything else we've seen? Like, what are you going to do that's creative? What are you going to do that's original? And I get that there's, from a studio standpoint, you slap The Exorcist on something and that's going to have more success, more likely, than something that's just another demon movie. But the problem is that most of these like remakes and requels and stuff like that are just that. They're just essentially the same of the same, just plastered with a famous name attached to it. And, I want to have kind of an open discussion and, of course, want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. How do you feel about just the age of horror right now? Where, movies, period, there's these waves of like, it's a copycat league, right? And so when there's success in one remake or one requel or whatever, there's all of a sudden this rush of like, that's what we got to do. That's the trend. That's the direction we got to go. But you see things like, you'll see like original takes, right? Like A24 does a really good job of kind of giving you new, fresh films. And even if it is sort of like X was very reminiscent of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it was their own thing. It was their own twist. It was their own story. There was just elements sprinkled in of that, rather than just like, hey, let's make a almost carbon copy film, or let's make a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre type film, something along those lines. And look, there is success, right? Like things like Top Gun, right? Top Gun Maverick, that was considered one of the best movies we've gotten in a very long time. It made and just blew all expectations, but that is an everybody film, right? Horror is very niche, right? The success of horror films is like, if you make a couple 100 million, that is a out of the park grand slam type horror film. Where some of these other films, like, a Top Gun, something like that, that can make $1 billion plus, which it did, right? And then you have these like continuations or new stories of the past, which like something like Halloween or even like Scream, like I don't mind it, but even Scream, which, I want to touch on too, is something that it was a carbon copy in many ways of Scream 5 and 6 rather than going the originality route. And sometimes, speaking of like Halloween, sometimes they go too left field and it becomes something that's just not what the audience had hoped for or intended, right? Halloween 18, many people were like, okay, fine, let's get back on track. We're heading in a good direction. It's very reminiscent of a Halloween film. Okay. And then you get to Halloween Kills, and then that kind of divided audience, but I understood the idea. I wasn't a fan of Halloween Kills at all, but I understood the thought process of like, let's just give like a Michael greatest hits. And then you go and you have the trilogy at the end, the conclusion, and they just went completely left field. And in many ways, I guess they tried to be original. It just, they just missed the mark. They went to be original for a series that wasn't meant to be original, right? So it just, or they didn't establish that originality from the beginning. And we see these like things like The Conjuring, right? Gives you these fresh takes. You look at franchises like Saw, right? And there is a freshness that is in demand. Because you see these like Skinamarink has success for like a real indie film. Stuff like that. You see, again, A24 films seem to really kind of have just quality reactions. And you get all of these original films that have success, yet Hollywood just seems to kind of backtrack and just, okay, well, what's the That was great. I'm glad that that film had success. Okay, but what is our remake that we're going to make today? Right? Like now it looks like we're getting this wave of series, right? On streaming. We're getting Welcome to Derry. We're getting a Camp Crystal Lake. We're getting, there's reports of a Halloween series, a Nightmare on Elm Street one, right? Like they're trying to pump out series now. And that'll very likely be the trend, which I'm not completely against, but from a theatrical standpoint. And it's, I mean, we're seeing it with everything. I mean, even like Marvel, it's like the same thing over and over again. Like, and people are just burnt out on it. People are just like, you're not doing anything different. And my fear is that that's going to be the trend with horror. And horror, you're just going to see continue to sort of dwindle down to the point where there is no major blockbusters in horror. It's like the indie films that are created for like 100 grand and make, 3 million, 5 million, whatever. And then there's like just the Halloween film, and it's like, how long can those stay fresh? Right? And again, Scream, right? Like, how long can Scream stay fresh if they're just basically regurgitating past storylines? Like, Scream 6 did a lot of cool things. It was creative in a lot of ways, but it also was, in many ways, carbon copy to Scream 2. And even had some sprinkled elements of Scream 3 in it, right? Scream 5 was literally a carbon copy version of 96. It was like modernized. And look, I enjoyed the films for what they were. Like, I thought that they did some cool things. I thought that they did a good job of modernizing it. I thought they did a good job of kind of adding that darker tone, kind of picking up the pace a little bit. So there were just gems, I guess, that you could take out of it. But overall, it was, like, especially after Scream 5, more so than Scream 6, but Scream 5, I was just like, I saw that movie. Like, I left the theater and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this movie. Like, I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just, it kind of felt just like another movie to me. And I get it. Like, that was supposed to be the, just fan film, right? Like, that was supposed to be the homage to Wes Craven. But you could have done that and not done like 90% of what you did in that film, right? And then Scream 6, it's like, again, like, you're giving us these like legacy characters, and like that's a big trend right now, like bringing back the legacy characters, even in the upcoming Exorcist. But they don't write any quality stories for these characters. Like, what was the point of Gail in Scream 6? Even Sydney in Scream 5, like, didn't really serve a purpose outside of like just having Sidney Prescott there. Like, there was nothing that she did outside of like maybe shooting through the doors that Sidney Prescott would have done that no one else would have done. Scream 6, even Kirby. Like, what was Kirby's connection and tie-in other than that she was a victim in Scream 4 and had no other purpose other than, like, it was Kirby, right? Like, even her backstory stuff, like, just didn't add up and make sense, like, timeline-wise. It just was, like, a little off and a little odd, right? And there's nothing in that film that Kirby did that another just random cop character or FBI agent character couldn't have done. Like, there was no written connection that it was like, okay, like, that makes sense why Kirby's a part of it. Like, if it was something like Ghostface was tied to Jill or something, I don't know, then maybe it's like, okay, like, is maybe even give just a looming thought of like, is Jill alive? Like, what's going on? Or, something like that to where Kirby's connected. I'm not saying that they should have done that. I don't want them to continue down this road of like, let's just tie everything to the past. But that's the trend right now of like tying everything to the past and having these, legacy characters involved. And then like, you look at like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre requel, right? And you have Sally Hardesty she just gets butchered in like 20 seconds. It just served no purpose. It was just, again, the lack of creativity. And it's like, at what point do we start creating new ideas and concepts, right? Like, even Saw appears to be a victim of this. Instead of continuing the story or, heading down a direction, they are going backwards, right? This is supposed to be in between 1 and 2. So even Saw isn't coming up with like the originality rather than continuing on and trying to tell a new story or whatever, right? It's just this constant regurgitation of just the same thing over and over again. And it sucks because, look, I love horror. I'm, as big of a horror fan as anybody. And it's my favorite genre. I make videos about it. I talk about it, right? Like, I try to stay up to date the best of my ability. I try to watch all these films and all that stuff. But it's just, it becomes hard at times because it's like, you watch a movie and it's like, I feel like I've already seen this movie. You watch this movie and it's like, I feel like we've been here. And then every once in a while something comes along, like, a Barbarian or something like that. Or a Knock at the Cabin or, stuff like that, right? And you're just like, okay, like, that was cool. Like, something different, something creative, right? M. Night Shyamalan does a pretty good job of like coming up with random things, right? But it's just, it almost feels like the days of trying to be creative is lacking. You know what another great example is? Paranormal Activity, Next to Kin. I actually really enjoyed that. And instead of just regurgitating the same thing, they just made a whole new story. And I thought it worked. I thought it was great. It's like, why can't we do that? Like even Scream, right? Like, tell a new story, right? Like, you have the tie-ins, you did all that. Okay, let's start again. Keep it simple. Get back to basics. Even like because eventually they're gonna come out with a Halloween again. Like, get back to basics, right? Like all of these films, all these franchises, all of it. Like, like let's be creative and tell new stories, right? Like Saw could have went and told a whole new story and had a tie-in and connection. But no, instead, let's go back to the past. The Exorcist. They could have came out with a cool, maybe different type of Exorcist-style movie rather than the same old. Because The Exorcist is going to be the same thing. It's going to be, the head spinning, the spider walk, all that stuff. And it's just going to be the over-the-topness for the over-the-topness. Like, why not create, like, an Exorcism of Emily Rose type thing again, where it was like really psychological in many ways. It's like, is what she's going through real, or is it just kind of in her head? Like what is happening here? Right? Like, let's get back to just creativity. You could do the same type of films, but you're telling me no one else can do something different? Like, you're telling me that you can't make a different kind of like demonic movie or different type of, slasher or whatever, like things like Cabin in the Woods and stuff like that. Like, it was just a nice refreshing twist, a nice refreshing take, of like your typical tropes and stuff. And it's like every time we get those kind of movies, they usually have success. People usually love those things, but it's just like the push for it from studios don't really seem to be a thing. But anyway, just was thinking about it, just something that I thought of, and wanted to talk to you all about it and get your thoughts and opinions. So let me know down in the comments below. How do you feel about it? Do you think like, yeah, there is this kind of staleness to it? Do you think, no, it's fine, like, at least we're getting something? All right, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I would love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. It helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things Scream, doing this wonderful community, and all of our discussions. See you all in the next one.